Are you thinking about making a pixel art game with Unity and you're not quite sure where to start, or you've started and you can't figure out how to get it all set up correctly? If so, my name's David, and I'm going to help you figure out how to do that in this video. I've done a couple pixel art game setups in the past, and I think it's changed a little bit. It's an interesting process too, because there's two or three things you have to kind of get working in concert for it to behave the way you would want it to work. So today we're going to take a look at that. And if you don't have Unity yet, just go to, you want to go to the Unity website. It's /download, and you can download Unity for whatever platform you're on there. And then once you have that, you'll probably also get the Unity hub. And what you'll want to do is you'll want to go up here to New Project, and you want to pick 2D, and then you want to create project, and you can name your project here or provide the location down here. I've already done all that because some of that on my computer for some reason takes a very long time, so I just did that in advance. And then I'm gonna get this out of the way. So when you start Unity up, if you're not familiar with it, what you're gonna get is on the left here, you're gonna have a sample scene, and a scene's kind of like the top level container for where you're gonna work when you're in Unity. And then you can have multiple scenes, but everything's gonna happen like within a scene. And then you have a camera by default, and this is going to be set up, should be set up to use orthographic over here automatically. And all that means is it's not going to have a perspective. It's just going to be like a kind of like a straight on camera. And then I'm just going to give you a quick tour of this stuff. So on the right is the inspector. This lets you change properties of things you have selected over here in your scene. And your scene's made up of a bunch of game objects that have different types of game objects that have different components. And then by default down here, you're going to have the project view, which is going to show you all the files involved in your project. And packages are things that Unity includes. These are the dependencies, basically. And then the assets folder is going to include all the things, all the files that you're creating for the most part. And sometimes I like to move this around. This layout's a little different from what I'm used to from older versions. I'm going to try moving this up here next to hierarchy. I want to actually see if I can get these side by side. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, this is a little closer to what I'm used to. Let me just move that out of the way. Yeah, so let's go with that for now. And in order, there's a couple other things I should mention. So by default, you're going to have a scene view, and this is kind of your view as the game creator of what the scene looks like and like what the different things are that you can control or change. You're going to see a lot more in this view than you'll see if you were to hop over to this view, which is just like a preview of the game, essentially. And if you were to hit run at this point up here, your view onto the game would just be this kind of blue background. I'm going to try to run this. Let's see how long it takes. For some reason, the Unity, the newest version of Unity, the beta, has been incredibly slow for me. But we'll give this a second and see if it can run. And I think that's the game running. It's not going to be super exciting right now because we haven't done anything. If you want, when you're running the game, you can pause it, or you can just hit play again and then I'll stop it. So we'll switch back over here. In order to do a pixel art style game, we're going to need a few things. We're going to need Tilemaps so we can draw our scene. We're going to need a character sprite that we can move around on the screen. And then we're also going to want to set up a movement script for the character. And then in addition to all that, we're going to want to set up a camera. And we'll be using the Cinemachine camera, and I'll show you how to add that here in just a second. But to get started, we want to make a new folder here. So I'm just going to right click and do create folder. And we'll give that a second, see what it does. All right, so we got a new folder. We're going to rename that to sprites. Actually, I'm going to call it images for now. So we will take a couple images that I already have. You'll want to grab some kind of tile map. You can find free tile maps online. But I'm just going to drag one that I already have into images. And yeah, it's just a little slow. Let's see what we get. Did that add a file there? Okay. So if we pull this over a little bit, we can see we've got this file. And then I'm also going to bring in another sprite. So one of these is kind of the tile map, and one of these is where I'm going to pull my sprites from. So we'll start out by picking family here, and this is where I'm going to pull my character sprite from. And up here at pixels per unit, set this to 64 for now. This is going to be, the size you're going to want to use here is going to be like whatever the tile size is that you're using, and the tiles that I'm using are 64 pixels by 64 pixels. That's pretty big. Like, you'll probably want to find tiles that are smaller, maybe like 16 by 16. But anyway, and then at this point, I have a image that has multiple characters in it. So I want to go to multiple here, and then I want to go to sprite editor, and that's fine. And then here, it's going to show us all the different characters that are in here. And what we're basically trying to do is slice this up and tell Unity that these are 5 separate images that we want to access independently. So I'm going to go to automatic and leave pivot at this. Actually, we're going to change this to by cell size. I think these are 62. I don't know, they're 60 by 102. Let's see. You can see in the background it's like adjusting as I go. Okay, I think that's right. Yeah. So if we look at that, you can see the way it's slicing this up looks correct. So and for now, just leave the pivot in the center. You may eventually want to change that for your project, but it'll be fine for what we're trying to do. So we're going to slice that. Okay, so that's all sliced. And then we can go through and click on each one of these and name it. So I'm going to call this Sun Teen, Sun Brunette, Mom, Sun Blonde, and then Father. All right, and then once we're done with that, we'll want to go up here and just hit apply, and then we can close this out. And let's see. So now if we open this up here, hit this little thing that looks like a play icon, you can see these are all split out, and we have separate sprites for each person. And then what we can do over here is in our sample scene, we can add a new 2D object for a sprite. Actually, we want to. This is interesting. Let's try a square. Okay, they've added more options here than what I'm used to. Oh, that's an actual square. Or I guess its sprite is a square. I don't know. It's strange. Let's try just dragging over one of these characters. Maybe we can grab the mom and put her in as the sprite. And then now if you can kind of scroll in and out to zoom. So you can see if we scroll, we can see the mom there. And we're going to rename this to be player. And then there's a couple other things that we're going to want here. So for now, we're going to add a new component called actually, I'll just get to it. You can go to Physics 2D, and you can go to Rigid Body 2D. And what we're going to do is, there's a bunch of settings here. We're going to leave dynamic on and we're going to change gravity to 0. We don't want gravity to affect the player. And the reason that we want this rigid bodied 2D is because eventually we're going to want the player to be able to collide with different things in the scene. And we need that to be on dynamic for it to do that. So we will close that. And then the next thing we're going to want to do here is add a component that is a script. And the scripts are just how you are going to program your character to move around. So we're going to go new script, and we're going to call this player movement. So we'll do create and add. And you can see over here now we've got a script, and then it should show up in the project files over here. Let's see. Is there a way to refresh these? Oh, it's just really slow. So got to give it a second here. Okay, is it done doing whatever it was going to do? Let's try closing this. So I'm trying to figure out where it put this thing. Oh, here it is. Okay. So under assets, now there's a player movement script. Let me see if I can pull this out a bit. So what I'm going to do again is make a new folder over here, and we're going to call it we're just going to call it scripts. And then we'll move our player movement script into there. And then under scripts now, we can open this up. You can edit this in whatever you want to edit it with. By default, I think you're going to get mono is the editor. But if you double click on it, it should just open up. And it's given a little preview over here on the right to show you what's in it. So let's double click on that. So in my system, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code or VS Code, but you can use whatever you want. I think by default it will just open in Unity's default editor. And yeah, if it doesn't just give you what you want automatically, you can go and just open the folder. So I'm doing pixel art game tutorial. And then if we open assets here, we can go to scripts, player movement. And this is just like the default Unity script. So what I'm going to do is open up another script that I have already, just so it saves some time here. Give me just a second. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this, but I'll explain what all this does here shortly. So player movement. So actually don't need that. Could take that out. So here, this is a mono behavior called player movement. We need a way to control the speed of the player. So the way you do that is you make a public variable, and this is just an integer for speed. And we're going to default to 10. And then what we want to do is we want to be able to grab the rigid body that we created off of the character, and that's the thing that's going to allow it to move around and interact like through collisions. And if you wanted to have physics and stuff, that's what you would also want. And then we need a couple other bits of information. We're going to want to know like what the velocity is of the player, and this is a vector, so this is going to include like the X and Y movement. And then similarly, we want to know what the user is like inputting, like if they're pressing up or down or left or right or two of those at the same time. So then basically when we start, we want to grab we want to we want to set the velocity to be the speed in both the X and the Y direction. And then we want to go grab that rigid body 2D off of the game object. And then when we run our update, this is when we're taking input or checking on things that are happening in real time, we want to set the input movement to be a new vector that is the input in the horizontal direction and the vertical direction. And if there's no input, those will both be 0. And they can be positive or negative depending on which direction you're going. And then down here in our fixed update, so this is an update that happens on a fixed cycle. We'll want to take the input movement, so that's whatever keys somebody's pressing and the directions that they're causing the player to move, and we want to multiply that by whatever the velocity is, and then if we need to take into account that we're just doing a small step in time, so you also have to multiply by this time.delta time. Otherwise, your character will just fly all over the place because these updates happen so fast. And then what we'll do is we'll take the delta to create a new position, and that'll be whatever the position is of that rigid body 2D plus whatever change we have here. And then this is important. You want to set the position by doing using the rigid body 2D's move position method and passing in the new position. And this is what's going to cause all the physics and stuff like that to get taken into account in collisions. So we'll just save that. We'll go back to Unity. And let's see if we can move the character around real quick before we do anything else. All right, so we're going to try playing. If you have errors, compilation errors will show up down here in the console, but we don't have any. Looks like we should be okay. Let's see if we can just move the character around. So yeah, I'm using my up, down, left, right arrow keys, and we can move the character around like that. So it's a good start. We've got a character that we can move. And there is a more complicated input system now that's part of Unity, but I'm not going to get into the details of that. I don't actually know it well myself. And I think it's the kind of thing where you need to do some setup work in advance, but then it saves you more work down the road as you go. But this is good enough for what we're doing. So I will go ahead and stop the game by hitting the play button. So now that we've got a player that can move around, the next thing that we want to do, sorry, I'm going to change this to player. I don't know why it was player square. The next thing we're going to want is to add a tile map in the background. So we're going to go to 2D object, tile map, I guess rectangular. There's a lot of new options in here I haven't seen, so sorry. I may be surprised as I go through some of this. And then before we get into doing this, we're also going to want to go down to our images and go through a similar process that we did for the family sprite with this forest image. So I'm going to click on forest, and then I'm going to change pixels per unit again to 64. And I'm going to go to sprite editor, and we will say apply. That's just basically asking to save that change that we just made to pixels per unit. And then here you'll see we have like this giant sprite. I don't know if this is technically an atlas or not, but it's like all of the individual sprites put into one sprite sheet, which is just a more efficient way to do it. And so here we want to edit this. Let's see. Sorry, we want to slice this thing up. So how do we do that? Pixels. Trying to figure out why this one's behaving a little bit differently than the other one. Let me close this out for a second. Oh, I'm sorry. The sprite mode needs to be set to multiple, and that'll let us edit it the way we want to edit it. And then here we should be able to do slice. We'll change it to grid size 64 by 64, pivots in the center. And you can see the grid back here looks pretty good, so we'll just go ahead and slice that up. And we'll close that out. And we're not going to bother naming these. It's like just you know, if you were doing this for, I don't know, it may be worth it to you to do this, but for this demo, I'm not going to mess around with it. We'll just hit apply. It may take a little bit. And then if we go over here again, you should see when we open this, we'll get those separate tiles for each of these. So should be in a good spot there. And the next thing we're going to do over here is go to Tilemap, and let's see, I think we have to actually create a Tilemap asset or something. Let's see. Oh, never mind. So basically at this point we do have our tile map, but I think we need to make a tile palette. And I'm trying to remember where you set that up. So let's see. Tile palette. Okay, here we go. So so this is under window and then 2D and tile palette. And then we want to create a new tile palette. And we're going to call this forest. And I think we can leave it, the cell size is automatic. I'll see what we get. And this is going to have to be saved somewhere. So let's just make another folder that's tile palette. We'll open that up and we'll call it forest. Oh, sorry. I guess it just wants the folder. So we'll select the folder. And then I think, so it says drag tile sprite or sprite texture here. So I'm going to go back to our images and I'm going to try dragging this whole thing, see what we get. Okay, and this is going to also want to create tiles. So it says generate tiles into folder. And so we're going to go up here again and we're going to say new folder tiles. And then within that, we're going to say new folder forest. And we're going to stick them in there. And this may take a while because it's going to import each of these individually and it turns them into some kind of asset files. So we'll sit here and wait for this to go. So the idea is you're taking the sprite sheet, you're cutting it up into all these pieces, and then you're setting it up so that you can have a little palette where all those pieces are available, and you can use that to like draw your scene. And we already have the tile map set up and the grid for it, which is what you see in the background behind this tile palette. And so as we paint onto that, it's just going to lock those tiles into place there. So you don't have to worry about like aligning them manually. So we're going to let this thing run for a little bit. It's almost there. Okay, cool. So now what you see is we've got this nice tile palette here with all the things we want to use. Just because I'm limited on space, I'm going to move that over as well. Now let's see if we can get the whole camera back in the scene here. Oh, sorry, I wanted this hand tool. I'm trying to get the, there we go. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our tile map. And let's rename this. Let's call this background for now. And we're just going to make a really simple background. So I'm going to move this around slightly. I'm going to make something that's slightly bigger than the screen. We'll see why in a little bit. And we'll just do something basic for now. And we're almost there. We want to put this just slightly outside of the frame. Yeah, I basically want to make it bigger than the camera so that we can get into doing some movement where we move outside of where the camera is initially focused. And then I think up here we can use this fill tool if we grab like dirt here. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that gives us our background. And I'm going to get off of the fill tool so I don't accidentally fill in the entire world space. So cool. So now we have a background. If we want to as well, you can come in here and like spice this up a bit, put some variation. Some of this just helps too to give you a point of reference, like when you're moving around. If it all looks exactly the same, it can be kind of difficult. So let's just put a few odds and ends in here. And then if you want to, you could just like select an entire big object over here and drop it somewhere. So maybe we can do that. We'll like drop this right next to the, well, we'll get into that in a second. That's going to be a little bit special. So, but maybe for now we can make a new tile map. Let's go ahead and do it. We'll make a new rectangular tile map. We're going to call this obstacles. And on obstacles, we will drop one of these. It's important to up here in the tile palette to change your active tile map to whatever you just created. So here we're going to do obstacles. It doesn't just happen by default and it can be pretty confusing. So we're going to drop that on there. And I think that's it. I don't know why it's got a big red border around it. Saying sub asset not found. Maybe I accidentally grabbed too much. Let's see. Sorry, that's an older project that's open for some reason. Maybe that's why things are so slow. Let's see. Sorry. Just pull this in a bit. Yeah, I don't know why it's complaining. Anyway, let's just try running this and seeing what happens. And yeah, as I mentioned, it's been a little slow, so it might take it a second to run. Okay. So we've got our normal map in the background, our normal tile map, but the obstacles are not appearing. And that might just be a sorting order thing. We can check that out over here. If we click obstacles. So there's a sorting layer down here, and there's the order in the layer. So we could change the order of obstacles to be 1, and it should show up on top. Yeah. And this is only going to affect the game like while this is running. So let's stop that for a second, and we'll make order in layer 1. We're also going to go down here and add some layers. So under sorting layer, we're going to add sorting layer, and then we're going to make a character layer, and we're going to make a background layer. And I think whatever's lowest is what renders on top. Z index is like negative, is increasingly negative as it comes towards you, because I think the camera's just set to be super negative. So yeah, we'll go ahead and hop back over here, and let's put the character on their own sorting layer. I think that's in here. And then we'll change the sorting layer on these to be background. And then let's try this one more time. Yeah, I think somehow we've painted with an asset that doesn't exist. I think that's what it's complaining about. Okay, so, we can move around. We're kind of floating on top of everything right now, which isn't the best, but we'll take a look at that next. So we're gonna stop that. And then the next thing we're gonna do is over here on obstacles. Oh, look at that. Why is that so wide? It looks like there's some weirdness happening here. So maybe in the tile palette we can use this eraser tool to get rid of some stuff there. Let's see. Is that better? It's still complaining about that. I'm not sure why. I'm going to try erasing that again. I don't know what is the problem. All right, let's try that one more time. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's red like that. Well, I'll have to look into that another time. Yeah, so at this point, what we want to do is we want to add collision because we don't want the player to just like be able to fly over the lake there, or these obstacles. So we're gonna go to physics 2D, and we're gonna add a. Oh my bad. We're gonna go to Tilemap, and we're gonna add a Tilemap collider. And you'll see what that did was it's making a little outline around each tile, and that's not quite what we want. So the other thing we want to do is we want to add a component, and we want to do physics 2D, and we want to do composite collider. And then up here where this says in Tilemap collider 2D, we want to say used by composite, and then that'll change it to just treat the whole object as one big collider. And then we'll want to go in here and set body type to static, because this thing is never going to move around on its own. So we don't need to. If you have dynamic, it's gonna. I think it's gonna try and like run a bunch of different physics stuff on it that doesn't need to run. So let's try it again and see if that stops it. All right, that didn't work. Let's see. So let me just double check a couple things. So we have our. I think the problem is that we need to add the collider to our sprite for the player, or our game object for the player. So here we want to add a. Probably you can do different kinds of colliders. I'm going to do a capsule collider. And we're going to zoom in a bit here so we can see this thing, but we don't really, I don't want to change the whole thing. We don't need this to be too big. So I'm going to just say like 0.5, maybe 0.6. You should see it changing there. And then we don't need it to be that high. We really want collisions to happen more around the feet. So we're going to go 0.5, and then we're going to move this down. So negative 0.5, and I think that's pretty good. Let's go with that. And this is going to help with this perspective, this top-down perspective. This is going to let the collision happen more around the player's feet and allow them to overlap with things in the background. And that's why you want to kind of shape your collider. It's usually good to make it a little bit smaller than the character is. But I think it's not going to let me make it too much smaller at this point. I'm not sure why. That's something I need to look into. Okay, so now we have this thing where the player can't run into this. Now there is something weird that'll happen if we go over here and we try to go to the corner. We can spin like this. And the reason this is happening is because it's basically using physics on this 2D sprite, and it's got some rotation in there because we clipped the corner on part of our sprite. But if we go in here and we use to our rigid body 2D and go to constraints, we can say freeze rotation, and then that won't happen. So you know, it's just stop rotating. So if we were to stop this and play it again with that on, it's important too, by the way, that you go back and change your settings when the game stops, because that's the only way it's going to remember them. any changes you make while it's running is just temporary. So now we don't get into that weird situation where we like accidentally spin around in circles. So we're getting a little bit closer. The thing that we're gonna have trouble with now is like as the character moves around, just the camera's fixed in place and doesn't do anything. And then you'll probably also notice there's these nasty little lines between our sprites. And this is getting into like trying to set things up in a pixel perfect way. So that's going to be our next step, is to try to get this to work in a pixel perfect way. So we're going to stop that. And then what we want to do is we want to bring in Cinemachine, which is a nice camera system that's officially supported by Unity, I think. And if this is the first time you're doing this, you may have to go up here to where it says packages and project, and then change it to like Unity registry. And then up here you can do a search, I think, for Cinemachine. Okay. And then just down here, you'll click, sorry, my face is blocking this. There's an install button down here, so just hit install. And that may take a little while, so we'll have to let that run. But Cinemachine's what does the magic of being able to let you, easily follow your character around. And then it has a lot of nice features for controlling how the camera works and lets you do some more advanced things that look really nice. So we're gonna have to let that install. And basically what'll happen is it'll make a virtual camera, and your main camera will be controlled by that virtual camera. And then we'll have to set a couple things up for it to be pixel perfect. And again, the new Unity has just been super slow for me in general. Although I'm coming from a very old version, like the 2019 version, I think. Okay, so now instead of saying install, it says remove down here, which means it's installed. So we will close that. And then we want to add a Cinemachine camera. And I'm trying to recall where we do that. I don't think it's... Okay, it is available here. So if you right click and you go to Cinemachine, you're going to want, I think, virtual camera. Yeah, here we go. So we've got our virtual camera here. And I think that will automatically add to your main camera this Cinemachine brain. And change both of these to late update for now. And then it has some properties that we're going to want to set. So over here, we're going to look for, there's two properties here. There's follow and look at. And for now, I'm just going to move our player to be follow. And I think that's enough. Let's just see if that part works, and then we'll look at some other things. So now as we move, you'll notice that the camera is following us around. And we still have these weird pixelation issues, but we'll get to those in a second. So yeah, so this is pretty cool. Like, you notice when you stop, the camera kind of like eases to catch up with you. And all this is very controllable in the settings for the camera. And then we can't run into that. So yeah, this is looking pretty good. So we're going to stop that. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and make this thing pixel perfect. So we're going to go to add component, and we want to do pixel perfect camera. And here's where we want to say our assets are 64 pixels. And you have a choice here. In general, this is 320 by 180 is a pretty good size for retro pixel art games, because it's going to let you use smaller tiles, which are a lot easier to create. The more resolution you get in your tiles, there's just a lot more work that can go into creating them and like animating and stuff like that. But our tiles happen to be 64 pixels. So that's what we're going to go with. And the reason this low resolution is nice is because what you're going to want to do is like scale up in even multiples for bigger screens. And with a smaller size, it makes it easier to have your pixels multiply up and fit well within a like in arbitrary screen sizes. The bigger the size gets, each multiple is like much bigger, so it gets harder to scale it up correctly or scale it up to make use of the space. So anyway, we're gonna double this for now. We're gonna say 640 by 360. It's worth noting too, this is like a 16:9 ratio. And then I don't know if it matters, but here I'm just gonna say update render texture, upscale render texture. And then we'll try playing this one more time. And I'll mention we're not done. This is going to cause some problems. But you'll notice one thing that it does is we can move around and we're kind of like zoomed in, basically. So we're going to stop the game. And then over here, we're going to want to change free aspect to 640 by 360. And you'll notice that just took care of our weird issues with having like lines between tiles. And then down on our on our virtual Cinemachine camera, we're going to add an extension, and it's going to be the Cinemachine Pixel Perfect script. And that's just going to help Cinemachine understand that your main camera is trying to be pixel perfect, and they're going to not fight each other to set certain properties. And so we're going to run that again, see how that goes. And yeah, now you can see we're moving around and it's looking a little bit better. The character's a little jumpy. See if we can do something about that. Yeah, I had mixed results with trying to prevent the character from being jumpy. I'm gonna change this to fixed update. It's got to do with the updates competing with each other to set the position. So it actually looks like what we want is on Cinemachine Brain, update method is fixed update, and then the blend method is late update. Let me see if we change that to fixed if it gets messed up. Yeah, that looks bad. So we're gonna want fixed update and late update, and we're gonna have to stop the game to make that stick. So cool. Now we have that in place. So at this point, we're looking pretty good. We've got the characters moving smoothly. We have collisions working. The only bad thing now is we can just like the camera and the player can move outside of the map. And in this video, I'm just gonna briefly look at preventing the camera from moving outside the map. But doing it for the player, it's going to be a little more complicated, and I'll probably just cover that in another video of its own. So just quickly, let's see if we can keep the player from moving around outside of the map. So we'll stop that. And just real quick, I'm going to save this just in case this project crashes for some reason. And then I'm going to go to our virtual camera. And if you want to lock the camera in, you can add another extension through Cinemachine Virtual Camera on the Cinemachine Virtual Camera object. And it's called Cinemachine Confiner 2D. And it's going to tell you down here a bounding shape is required. And it's a collider 2D. And I think it actually requires a polygonal collider, but I could be wrong. But we will check that out. So what we're going to do is go back to our background. We're going to add a component. We're going to add polygonal collider 2D. And you'll see that's going to make this big shape here that we're going to want to edit. So we want to click on edit inside polygonal collider. So edit collider. It'll turn green when you do it. And just move these to be down more in line with the background. This is going to be a little annoying. This is kind of hard to do on the small screen that I'm sharing here. So yeah, give me just a second to get that stuff in line. We're gonna have to do edit each time for this. Okay, we'll do these. And what we're doing is we're setting up a definition of the bounds that we want to confine our camera to. So we're gonna set those up, and then at that point we should be good. We can zoom out here and just make sure. But yeah, it looks like that's pretty good. It's a little weird on the top. Let's see if we need to pull that top one in. Looks like we might need to pull it in just slightly. There's probably a way to lock these into straight lines. I just don't know off the top of my head how to do it. And we'll zoom out. It looks like it's kind of just turned it into some triangles. I'm not really sure what's going on. And I'm going to hit edit one more time just to make sure. Yep, it looks like that green line is going around there the way we would want it to. And then from there, we can click back on our virtual camera. And we need to provide the collider. And what we can do is just drag the background over there now. And it's going to automatically pick up that polygonal collider. And then if we hit play, we should see the camera at least confined to the size of the map. So, sorry, I think I need to change on the background now that we have this collider. This is another thing that's important. We want to change this to is trigger. And what that's going to do is it's going to prevent collisions from constantly happening between the player and the map. When it's trigger, it's gonna detect that things collided, but it's not actually gonna run the normal collision logic. I think this is gonna let us move around. Yeah, here we go. So now we can move around like we'd expect to. And our bounds are a little bit high on the top there, but you can see the camera's more or less just stopping at the edge of the screen. And then it'll catch up with us. So, yeah, I mean, the next place you would want to probably take this is to keep the player from being able to move outside of the map. But you can see we do have a lot of nice stuff here already set up. Like, since the collider is on the feet, like, we get this nice overlapping effect with the background. So, yeah, I mean, this is quite a bit. This should kind of get you set up to where you can start working on a game. I knew how a bunch of these pieces worked independently, but I hadn't recently gone through and tried to get them all working together and have them behave nicely and like look smooth, so you don't get like jittering when the player moves or when the background moves. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with where we landed with this. If you wanted to tweak your camera to get different behaviors, you could do things like I'm trying to remember where the settings are for this. Yeah, so here you could do things like, sorry, I'm trying to look at where you handle changes. Oh, actually, one thing we might want to change is the orthographic size. I'm gonna try that real quick. See if that makes a difference. Oh no, that zoomed in too much. Let's not do that. All right, so let's go back here and change the lens to 5. But yeah, you can look at Cinemachine, but basically there's settings you can go in and adjust to figure out like how you want the camera to behave and tweak it to match, you know, what it is you want it to do. I'm still a little new to it. I think maybe it's under aim here. There's a lot of sliders you can use. So like if you adjust, for example, the soft zone, I think that's gonna affect like how far you have to move before the camera starts moving. Just try a slight change on that real quick. Yeah, you notice the camera is starting to move pretty quickly there. I think if we slide it back up, it's Oops, that's not what I want. Yeah, you can see here that it's going to expand like how far you have to move before the camera starts to move. And some of this is nice just so that your camera is not always moving. Like you can move left and right a little bit without having the screen itself move all over the place. If you're interested in that kind of thing, there's some really good videos on the camera in Super Mario 3 and I think Super Mario World. They did a lot of work to make the camera really nice on those games. But yeah, this should get you set up pretty well to start making your own 2D pixel art game. And yeah, if you have any questions, leave them below in the comments. I really do like to hear from you and know if this was helpful or not, or if you have suggestions about things to change or other questions that I can answer. And then if you wouldn't mind just hitting the like button, it really helps me out. It's all I ask. It's free. And if you're interested in seeing more videos like this, you can hit subscribe and click the little bell icon to get notifications when videos come out. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.